Well, hey there, current issues folks. This is intended to be a very short little video to give you an overview of what the final semester project is all about and how you should begin to prepare for it. If you haven't already done so, open up the assignment Dropbox. I think I called it project. In that is some instructions. The instructions that you see in the instructions area of the Dropbox also is in an attachment that you can click on, a Word document, if you want to print it out and look at it. Also attached to that Dropbox is an Excel file that gives you the grading rubric. And in this video, I'm going to talk through what I'm trying to accomplish with this project, how you should prepare for it, how you should gear up for it and organize your material, and then how we're going to grade it. And this is a significant part of your overall grade. The purpose of this class, what we were trying to accomplish in this class, was to make you aware, number one, of some of the various things that are impacting HR right now, some of the issues out there that HR is having to become aware of and deal with in their organizations. Secondly, we were trying to get you comfortable with SHRM so that you could learn how to research it. In a lot of your classes, doing academic research helps you to accomplish the goals of the class. But when you get out into the real world and do HR, the academic literature is not going to be as valuable to you as what's going on really in HR. And the best place, or at least one of the best places, to find out what's going on and to hear about, to read about what people think about these kinds of issues is through the SHRM website. We've had a number of discussions already this semester. You've led two of them, or you are about to lead your second one if you haven't done that yet. And during the process of preparing for your weeks and the discussion board and the phone call, you've had to do a little bit of extra research in SHRM and find a series of articles that help you to understand the issue. Even on the weeks where you're not doing the lead, I hope that you've been getting into SHRM and reading the links that have been provided by your peers, but finding your own anyway. I would suspect that some of you probably are kind of doing what you have to get by because this is one of 4 classes or 5 classes, and you haven't gotten as much benefit out of SHRM as I had wanted you to get. If that's the case, and if that's true for you, this project's going to be a little bit harder because you're not as familiar with SHRM as you really need to be able to research these projects. So what we're trying to do in this particular project is to let you play the role of senior HR or as consultant to HR and identify a problem that really exists in an existing company somewhere, and you either propose the solution to it because you're in charge of HR, or you play the role of that consultant where you help the HR people resolve this issue. And ideally, this is an issue that senior management could have come to HR and said, we need you to work on this for us. At the bottom of the Dropbox instructions and at the bottom of the printout that you would make if you were to go ahead and look at that and print it out, the bottom of page 1 actually, there is a bolded statement that I want you to use for the frame of reference for the context here. And that statement says, the CEO contacted HR yesterday to say that he has been hearing that our company has a problem with blank, and has tasked HR with coming up with a plan to address it. So again, the idea is that the CEO is sitting in his or her office somewhere and has just been hearing little rumors that morale is bad, or that folks don't know what they should be doing during the day because the job descriptions aren't clear or don't exist, or we're not effective with our budgeting on our raises because our performance appraisals don't generate good outcomes, or we've got folks who are dealing with issues, raising issues about discrimination or unfair practices or whatnot. You think about any of the topics that we've talked about this semester, and those could be potentially good topics for this. Now, so as I said, it needs to be an existing company. If you're in HR right now, I would respectfully request that you find another company, and don't do this about your company because you're too invested in that already as the HR person in this company. If you're not in HR in your company, maybe you could do an issue related to your company because you're not in HR and you're not working on this already. I don't want you to give me a summary of what you're already working on in HR. I want it to be something that you could step in unbiased. It's not intended to be a project where you say, here's the problem that we have with our company, this is what I've already done, and this is the last few steps I need to take. This needs to be a project or an issue in a company that we haven't started fixing yet. Because the idea is that you are going to go to senior management and say, this is what we propose that you do. Here's all the details you need. Now you tell me whether to proceed or not. And if you're already in the middle of solving that problem, it kind of defeats the purpose a little bit. So it's an issue that is kind of bubbling right now somewhere that really hasn't come to fruition yet, that hasn't started being resolved yet. And you're going to step in here and say, I've done some research on this. This is the specific thing that I would propose that you do to solve this problem. Now keep in mind that the problem may be bigger than what you can do in this project. It may be that morale is bad and you can't address morale, but you might be able to address one piece of morale, or you might be able to propose that we do this one thing that will start to help with morale, but you're not going to solve morale. It may be that we need job descriptions, but that's way too big for this. So maybe your project would be that we're going to propose that we establish this process to create job descriptions or job appraisals or whatnot, and we're going to start with this one job, with the understanding that if it works for this one job, the same idea, the same approach will work for any job that you pick at random. So make sure that the project is specific enough to be accomplished with relatively limited resources. So let's talk through this process real quick. The first thing that you're going to want to do is to find some HR somewhere. It might be the company that you work for now if you're not in HR. If you are in HR, as I said earlier, find another HR somewhere else. It may be your mom's company or your next door neighbor's company, or maybe you're in a little network of HR professionals like a SHRM thing, or somebody who works across town you talk to every now and then. Go to that person and say, I'm working on this project for this class and I need to be a consultant for you. If you're not in HR but you're working somewhere, you can go to your existing HR department and say, I'm working on this project in this class, let me be a consultant for you. And I would bet that they would say, here's a problem that we haven't gotten around to yet. It'd be great for you to kind of do some research and make a rough proposal, because you may end up giving them some great ideas that they could then take to senior management. When you make your presentation, I'm going to have somebody on the phone call similar to the people that have been joining our phone calls every Tuesday night that's going to play the role of the CEO. And that person, he or she, will know basically what you're going to be talking about. They will be provided with that statement that you have given to me. The CEO contacted HR yesterday to say that he or she has been hearing that our company has a problem with blank, you fill in the blank, and has tasked HR with coming up with a plan to address it. Our guest CEO will have that statement, so that when you start your presentation, the guest CEO will already know basically what the issue is. It's an issue with morale, or it's an issue with needing a policy about smoking, or needing a policy about body art, or whatever. So they'll have a general framework. So you identify what this topic is. You make it as narrow as you can to make it reasonable to research and propose solutions to. Maybe the problem is that our insurance premiums are going up and we've got to find a way to cut down on our medical costs. In which case you might not suggest that we implement a wellness program. That's huge. But maybe we build an on-site gym. I mean, that's a big project, but it is very manageable. It's very easily definable. Or maybe we institute a walking program at lunch. And that's very small, but that contributes toward the problem with wellness, or the problem with increasing insurance rates. So figure out what this problem is after you have identified what the company is that you're going to be working with, and then start going out to SHRM and looking at resources where people talk about how do we solve this problem. Look at resources that say, here's the kinds of things that you need to be thinking about, or this company that had this problem did this. And you start putting together those kinds of things and then researching for this company, what's it going to cost to do it? If we want to build a gym, where are we going to do it? Are we going to add a building in back of our building? Or are we going to take an existing room and clean it out and put some machines in there? What are the costs of the machines? When are we going to allow them to do this? Are we going to give them a longer lunch? What's that going to cost us? What kind of liability insurance do we need to have this equipment on grounds? Think about all the possible costs, and you want to factor in too the costs of the time of the people it takes to do this. If you're writing a policy, what kind of cost is there? We got a few pages that we're going to have to print to hand to people. Well, it's more than that, because there are people that are going to have to spend an hour a day for the next 2 weeks working on this. So what's their time worth that's going to cost us? It may not be additional costs to us, but reallocating existing costs. Again, you were going to spend 40 hours this week anyway. It's not any additional cost to have this project, but you're going to spend 6 hours on this project and not spending on something else. So there's the cost of those 6 hours. The teams, if we're going to have meetings, who's going to be involved and what's their hourly rate and whatnot. You need to be able, if you're going to present this to senior management, with the hopes of getting them to agree to say yes, to give them all the costs, to give them all the benefits. How are we going to lower our insurance premiums? What kinds of things can we put a dollar value on? And then when we compare what it's going to cost us to what we're going to get from it, where's the balance? So, are we going to lose money the first 2 years and then break even and then start making money? They want to know stuff like that. They also want to know who's responsible for this. It's just a great plan to say we're going to create job descriptions, but who's going to do it? What managers are going to be in the test batch that are going to need to be involved in this? How are you going to go about determining what needs to be in those things? By talking to employees. Who's involved in that? What's the timeline for this? By November, we got to be here. By January, we got to be here. By June, we got to be there. We ought to have this thing functioning by next October. There's a timeline involved. There's critical data points or timeline points, mile markers, where we know if we're making progress, if we're going to meet our goals, things like that. So as I kind of recap this, as I'm thinking, as I'm talking, you find a company that can tell you about a problem. You start researching that problem and you start brainstorming, if I were the one in charge of this, responsible for this, how would I go about solving the problem? Now, I can't do that. I have to get the approval of senior management, the CEO, the CFO, the COO, all those kinds of people. But I need to be able to tell them very succinctly, in just a few minutes really, how we should go about solving this problem. What's my recommendation as HR? So that they could say, yeah, sounds great, go do it. Or no, let's wait a little while. Or gosh, you don't know what you're talking about. So for this project, one of the last few days of class, we're going to have 5 different days, I think it is, where 2 of you will present your project. So it's a 30-minute phone call. Nobody else will be on the call except for you, the other person who's presenting that night, me, and our guest CEO. So 4 of us. And at whatever time it is that I have established for that first one for your class, they're going to be at 9:30 and 9:45. At 9:30, we'll give you the floor. You will do your presentation. The guest CEO will be listening intently to what you're talking about. We'll be searching for holes that you haven't addressed. I'll be working through our rubric to try to create a grade for you, but I'm not going to interact with you. At the end of the presentation, our guest CEO will ask you 2 questions. I don't know what they're going to be. They will be determined by the CEO on the spot based upon your presentation. If you have done an outstanding job of answering all of the questions, addressing all of the issues, they're going to ask you 2 questions that are very insignificant. One of them might be, when did you say this is going to occur? Or, who's going to be responsible for this, or something like that, and it's not going to be that hard to answer. But if you leave out something important, like what's this going to cost us, they're going to say, it sounds like a great plan, but what are the costs involved with this? And it's going to be harder for you to answer that. Their questions are going to be based upon what you've left out. When they've asked 2 questions, we will call it closed. We will thank you for your time. We will go to the next one. And so what we're looking for from you is about 8 minutes. When you go before senior management, you're not going to have a half an hour to lay out your presentation. They're going to want to hear the issue and be done. And they may have a couple of questions, but then they're going to move on to the next item on their agenda. So we're shooting for 8 minutes. Now, it's going to be hard to hit 8 minutes. I'm going to give you a little bit of a gap on either side. So we're really thinking 7.5 to 8.5. And you've got to be able to get this done no more than 8.5 minutes. But there's so much that needs to go into this that it's unreasonable to think that you could complete it in less than 7.5. You're going to have to gather enough information to go 7.5 and be able to talk through it logically with a good flow, but be done by 8.5. So let me look through my notes here. 60% of your grade really relates to the content of your presentation. 40% is the delivery of that. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. Hopefully that is most of what you need to know in terms of the structure. At the tail end of the instructions, there's a link to a doodle poll where you can go ahead and start signing up for the days and the times that you want. We're not really critically pressed because of the timing of this. In some classes when we do this, I say if you're not graduating, don't take the first 3 days because I got to get their grades in faster. But this is early enough to where I can give you feedback and still make my deadline for graduating senior grades. Take a look at the rubric real quick. Let's talk through that really fast before I close out this video. The first thing that we're looking for is the issue itself, up to 10 points. And there are 4 different options. It needs to be very, very clearly HR. It can't be something like we're trying to decide where to build a new plant. We want to do it in Charlotte or we want to do it in Raleigh. That's not an HR issue. That's an operations issue. Now, the issue that could be related to that is HR is how are we going to get the people, wherever it happens to be, how are we going to get the people employed? So you might have a recruitment strategy, or you may have an interviewing strategy or something like that. It has to be very, very clearly something that they would come to HR for, and it has to be narrow. So 10 points if it is clearly HR and it is very narrow in focus. And again, if the issue is that morale is bad, that might be an HR issue, but that's not very narrow. So your proposal has got to be some very small sliver of a piece of morale. All right, 9 points if it's very clearly HR, but it's way too broad for this. 8 points if it is not clearly HR, but it is narrow. And then I had a phone call coming in there real quick. 7 points if it's neither clearly HR nor narrow. 10 points for that. The proposal, is it logical? 5 points if I can say, yeah, it made sense the whole way through. 3 points if there were pieces that weren't real clear. And no points if I just completely got lost and couldn't figure out what you were talking about. So the more logical you can make it, the better. 35 points related to the analysis, the numbers, the timeline, the details of it. So that's where you want to spend most of your time. You want to give us a very quick overview of what you're trying to do here, but most of that 8 minutes is going to be the how we're going to do it. What's it going to cost us? What are we going to benefit from it? What's the return on investment if you can do that? The timeline, who's held accountable, who's responsible, those kinds of things. And that's really laid out at 35 points. You either do it perfectly or you do basically ABC on that. And hopefully if you do a presentation, it's at least a C. Then 10 points related to logistics. All right, the analysis part is the numbers and that kind of thing. The logistics is the who does it, the when are we going to do it, that kind of stuff. So 10 points, 9, 8, 7, or 5. That it comes up to 60. All right, and then the other 40 points is related to the how you go about doing it. At the end, as I said, of the presentation, the CEO is going to ask you 2 questions. Everyone will get 2 questions. They may be 2 very difficult questions. If you leave out something big, they may be very generic questions, but you'll have 2 questions. And 10 points relates to how well do you think on your feet or on your seat if you're sitting down, and how well do you answer those questions. 10 points of this is related to the time. And if you're in the 7.5 to 8.5 minute mark, you get all 10 points. For every 30 seconds on either side of that, you start losing points. The presentation style, I'm looking for 5 things. Were you very relaxed? There's some degree of jitters, but not clearly that you were off your game on this. Were you relaxed? Did you make good eye contact? It's going to be really important that you know this material. that you look at the camera or you look at the people on your screen, but not looking down at note cards. All right, so eye contact is good. Were you certain about your content? Were you confident about that? Did it flow pretty well from start to finish? Did you seem to be jumping around? You talked about numbers, you went to timelines, you went to accountability, you came back to numbers, you went back to timeline. Does it kind of flow? And then was your voice very strong? Do we have to turn up our volume to be able to hear you? If you've had problems with the phone calls so far, make sure that gets resolved before this phone call. And then the last thing is CEO feedback. When the call is over, the CEO is going to say, you know what, Susie did an outstanding job. I'd give her a 1. Susie did a darn good job. I'd give her an A. So the CEO is either going to give me a 1, an A, a B, or a C. A 1 is perfect. An A, B, or C is what it sounds like. And that comes to 10 points out of your grade, 10% of your grade. All that adds up to 100. What would I encourage you as you're thinking about this? Number one, get to the heart of what it's going to take to resolve this problem and figure out all the numbers you can possibly figure out. Do you have to give me any kind of PowerPoints or notes? No, you do not. In fact, it may be better if you don't. Unless you're getting into something that is so detail nitpicky that we're going to get lost in the numbers, in which case you may send me something ahead of time to have handy. But I would encourage you not to share a PowerPoint on your screen. If you want to be looking at a PowerPoint, that's fine, as long as your eye contact is good. If you want to be looking at note cards, that's fine, as long as your eye contact is good. Really only give me, by email, details on this thing if you really worry that we're going to get lost in all of this, and then just reference it and go about your presentation. Hope that makes sense. If you have questions, give me a call, send me an email, put a note on our discussion board for the class, and we'll try to address it. But otherwise, you've got your challenge now. You're going to make a presentation to senior management. You may do a horrible job on this. Sometimes people do. But because you've done this maybe horribly here, you kind of know what to do when you get out in the real world. It's not going to be that bad. So if you don't do as well as you like, that's okay. It's a learning experience. It's a whole lot better if you really fumble in this class project than if you really fumble in the real world. But probably you're going to do pretty well on this thing. Let me know if you have questions. Thanks.